There is exactly one rule at the Virginia Falls outpost that isn't written in the employee handbook. It isn't posted on the trailheads, and they don't mention it during the standard HR orientation videos. You only hear about it from the senior rangers after you've worked there for a few weeks, usually when you're sharing a cigarette or coffee behind the maintenance shed. The rule is simple. If you see a light at the base of the falls after sunset, you do not go down there. You don't radio it in, you don't investigate. You get in your truck, you drive back to the main station, and you log the night as uneventful. I thought it was hazing. Every park has its ghost stories or urban legends designed to scare the rookies. I'd heard stories about the Whistler in the Smokies or the Goat Man in Maryland. I figured this was just the local flavor of nonsense. I was wrong. I started working at the park in mid-May. It was a seasonal gig, something to fill the gap between graduating with my forestry degree and finding a permanent position with the state. The job itself was mostly mundane. I spent 90% of my time telling tourists to put their dogs on leashes or picking up empty Gatorade bottles from the picnic areas. The other 10% was sitting in the tower, watching for smoke that never appeared. The geography of Virginia Falls is specific, and you need to understand it to understand why I was so trapped. The falls are located at the bottom of a steep 2-mile ravine. There is only one way down and one way up, a narrow switchback trail carved into the limestone. Once you're at the bottom, you are in a bowl of rock. The sound of the water crashing down 150 feet is deafening. It drowns out everything. You could scream your lungs out down there, and the person standing 10 feet away wouldn't hear a thing. This happened in late August. It was a Tuesday, which meant the park was dead. We had a heat wave that week, pushing temperatures into the high 90s, so most hikers had cleared out by noon to find AC. By 7 p.m., the parking lot was empty. My shift was supposed to end at 8. I was doing the final sweep of the upper rim, locking the gates to the overflow lots. I was tired. The heat had been oppressive all day, and my uniform felt like it was glued to my skin. I just wanted to get back to my cabin, take a cold shower, and pass out. I pulled my truck up to the trailhead that leads down to the falls. Protocol says we have to get out and visually check that no cars are left in the lower lot. I put the truck in park and kept the engine running. The headlights cut through the twilight, illuminating the metal gate and the dense wall of pines beyond it. I walked to the gate and peered down the trail. It was already dark in the ravine. The sun sets fast in the mountains. One minute it's dusk, and the next minute it's pitch black. I was about to turn around and leave when I saw it. Way down at the bottom of the ravine, through the gaps in the canopy, there was a light. It wasn't a campfire. It was too steady and too white. It looked like an LED lantern or a high-powered flashlight beam pointing straight up at the waterfall. My first thought wasn't fear, it was annoyance. I assumed it was some college kids who had hopped the fence to go night swimming or drink beers where the rangers couldn't catch them. If I left them there and one of them slipped on the wet rocks and cracked their head open, it would be my ass on the line. Negligence isn't something you want on your record when you're trying to get a government job. I stared at the light for a solid minute, debating whether to ignore it. It didn't move. It just sat there, illuminating the spray of the water. I sighed, cursed under my breath, and went back to the truck to grab my heavy-duty mag light and my radio. I keyed the mic to let dispatch know I was going down. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a visual and a light source at the basin. Looks like trespassers. I'm going down to clear them out." There was a pause. Then the voice of Sergeant Miller came back. He sounded different than usual. Tight. "Unit 4, say again, you see a light?" "Affirmative," I said. "Stationary white light at the base, probably kids." There was a longer pause this time. Static filled the cab. "Unit 4, do not engage. Return to base. Over." I frowned at the radio. "Sarge, if they're down there, they're liable to get hurt on the slick rock. It'll only take me 20 minutes to hike down and boot them." "Unit 4, I am giving you a direct order. Leave the area, now." I was 22 and stubborn. I thought Miller was just being lazy, trying to avoid the paperwork of an incident report. I figured if I went down there, kicked them out, and solved the problem, I'd look like the proactive ranger. Copy that, breaking up, I lied. I turned off the radio and clipped it to my belt. I hopped the gate and started down the trail. The hike down is steep. The trail cuts back and forth across the face of the cliff. As I descended, the temperature dropped about 15 degrees. The air got heavy with mist. The smell of pine and damp earth was overwhelming. About halfway down, I stopped. The woods were silent. Usually, even at night, you hear things: crickets, tree frogs, the rustle of raccoons. But the only sound was the distant roar of the falls getting louder with every step. It felt like walking into a vacuum. I shined my light into the brush. Nothing. Just trees and shadows. I kept moving. By the time I reached the final switchback, the roar of the water was a physical weight in my chest. The mist was thick here, swirling in the beam of my flashlight like smoke. My boots squelched in the mud. I reached the bottom clearing. This is where the observation deck is, a wooden platform built out over the river, giving you a direct view of the falls. The light I'd seen from the top was gone. I stood there at the edge of the clearing, scanning the area. "Park rangers," I yelled. "You can't be down here." No answer, just the water crashing into the pool. I walked toward the deck. The wood was slick with algae and water. I swept my beam across the rocks at the base of the falls. I was looking for a cooler, a backpack, trash, anything that would prove someone had been there. There was nothing. The rocks were bare. I was starting to feel foolish. Maybe it had been a reflection, maybe a trick of the moonlight on the mist. I walked to the railing and leaned over, shining my light directly into the churning black water of the pool. That's when I smelled it. It didn't smell like river water. River water smells like mud and fish. This smelled sterile. It smelled like ozone and old copper. It was metallic, sharp enough to make my eyes water. I pulled back from the railing, shining my light around the perimeter of the deck. "Is anyone out here?" I called again, my hand resting on the mace canister on my belt. Then I saw the footprints. They were on the wooden planks of the deck, about 5 feet to my left. They were wet, dark impressions against the gray wood. Bare feet. I followed them with my light. They didn't lead from the trail to the railing. They led from the railing toward the woods. Someone had climbed out of the water. A chill that had nothing to do with the mist went down my spine. The footprints were large, too large. The spacing between the steps was almost 4 feet. Whoever or whatever made them was running, or they had legs much longer than a human being. I felt a sudden, intense urge to leave. It wasn't just fear, it was a biological imperative. My stomach dropped and the hair on my arms stood up. It was the feeling of being watched by a predator. I started backing away toward the trail, keeping my light trained on the tree line where the footprints disappeared. "I'm leaving now," I said, my voice cracking. "Park is closed." I took one step back, then another. Click. A sound came from the observation deck behind me. It was the distinct sound of a fingernail tapping against the metal railing. Click, click, click. I froze. I was 10 feet away from the deck now. I slowly turned my head and moved the flashlight beam back to the railing. There was a figure standing there. It was facing the falls, its back to me. It was tall, maybe 6'5", 6'6". It was naked, its skin pale and glistening in the mist. It looked hairless. The proportions were wrong. The arms hung too low, the elbows ending near the waist. The spine had a curve to it that looked painful, jagged ridges pressing against the skin. It was standing perfectly still. The water from the falls was crashing down just yards away, but the figure didn't seem to notice. My heart was hammering so hard against my ribs I thought I was going to pass out. I knew with absolute certainty that if this thing turned around, I would die. I didn't know how, but I knew. I took a step back. My boot hit a loose rock. It clattered loudly against the stone. The figure didn't turn. Instead, it bent backward. It didn't pivot at the waist. Its spine just folded. It leaned back until its head was upside down, looking directly at me. There was no face. Where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was just smooth, pale skin, like a mannequin, but wet and fleshy. Then a slit opened in the center of the face, a vertical slit. It let out a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a mimicry. It was my voice. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a visual." It was a perfect recording of what I had said in the truck 20 minutes ago. Same intonation, same static. Then it played the next part. Stationary white light at the base, probably kids. The slit widened. I saw teeth, too many, needle-thin and translucent, like a deep-sea fish. I didn't think. I ran. I scrambled up the trail, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly against the trees. I didn't look back. I could hear movement behind me. Not footsteps, it sounded like wet slabs of meat slapping against the rock. Slap, 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 fast. I hit the first switchback and slipped, slamming my knee into the gravel. I scrambled up on all fours, gasping for air. The sound was closer. I didn't have the breath to scream. I just pumped my legs, my lungs burning. I knew the trail was 2 miles. I knew it usually took 40 minutes to hike up. I did it in under 15. The slapping sound followed me the entire way. It stayed just at the edge of my hearing, always right behind the bend I had just cleared. When I saw the gate at the top of the trailhead, I nearly cried. I vaulted over it, catching my foot and sprawling onto the asphalt of the parking lot. I scrambled to my feet and threw myself at the truck door. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, snatched them up, and jammed them into the ignition. As I threw the truck into drive, my headlights swept across the gate. The figure was standing on top of the gate. It was crouched like a gargoyle, its long, pale arms gripping the metal bars. The vertical mouth was open. It mimicked the radio static, a loud, hissing white noise that pierced right through the glass of the windshield. I floored it. I drove 40 miles an hour down a gravel road meant for 15. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I hit the state highway and saw the lights of a gas station. I pulled over and threw up out the window. I sat there for an hour, shaking, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My radio was silent. I realized I had turned it off. I turned it back on. "Unit 4, Sergeant Miller's voice came through instantly. He sounded tired. "Unit 4, come in." I picked up the mic. My hand was shaking so bad, I almost dropped it. "Unit 4, I rasped. "Did you go down there?" Miller asked. There was a long silence. "No," I lied. "No, I saw the light go out. Must have been a reflection. I'm heading back to base." "Good," Miller said. "Good. See you in the morning." I didn't quit the next day. I couldn't afford to. I had rent to pay and student loans. I finished out the season, which was another 6 weeks, but I never worked a closing shift again. I traded every single night shift with a guy named Derek, paying him $50 a pop to take them. I never told Derek why. I never told anyone. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. On my last day, I was cleaning out my locker in the main station. Sergeant Miller walked in. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me pack my gear. "You're a good ranger, Simon. Good instincts." "Thanks," I muttered, not looking at him. "You know," he said, casually, "they found a hiker's backpack at the base of the falls this morning. just floating in the pool. It belonged to a girl who went missing in '98. I froze. The weird thing is, Miller continued, his voice dropping an octave, the backpack was dry inside, like it had been kept somewhere safe for 20 years, and her camera was in it. He paused. We developed the film. A lot of nice landscape shots. He walked over and placed a photo on the bench next to me. Thought you might want to see the last one. Miller turned and walked out of the room without another word. I looked at the photo. It was grainy and dark, taken with a flash at night. It showed the observation deck. Standing at the railing was me. I was wearing my uniform. I was looking over the rail. But the timestamp on the photo was from 1998, and the face looking back at the camera wasn't mine. It was a smooth, pale surface with a vertical slit. I left the photo there. I got in my car, and I drove back to Ohio. I haven't been hiking since.